Maplewood is one of those small New England towns that looks charming on the outside. White picket fences, church bells every Sunday, and folks who smile with their mouths, but not always their eyes. I moved here 3 years ago, hoping for peace. After my mom passed, hoping to start over. What I got instead was the back of the line. Mason's General Goods sat right on the corner of Pine Street in Maine. Locals called it the heartbeat of Maplewood, mostly out of habit, not sentiment. It sold everything from bread to brake fluid, run by second-generation owners and guarded by a manager named Craig. Harry Craig was the kind of man who believed respect was something you earned. Unless you looked like me. Then you had to earn it twice and maybe still wouldn't get it. White guy, early 50s, pressed shirts with rolled sleeves. The kind who called himself old school, like it was a badge of honor. He never raised his voice, but somehow his whisper cut deeper than a first day on the job. He glanced at my resumed finance major, top of my class once, and handed it back with a smirk. You're overqualified to scan barcodes, or maybe not. He laughed like it was a joke. I smiled like it didn't sting. That became the rhythm. He jabbed. I worked the front register. 6 days a week, morning shifts, no complaints, no drama. My uniform was always clean, my drawer always balanced. I said, "Yes, sir," even when I wanted to say, "Go to hell." Because that's what you do when the rent's due and the job market isn't taking calls. But the thing is, Craig didn't need a reason. Some days he'd find something anyway. You're too slow with customers. Don't smile so much, it's fake. Fix your hair, it looks messy. One time I heard him say to another supervisor, not knowing I was behind him, they only hired her to check the diversity box. Should have hired some. I didn't cry. Not ever in front of them. I'd just go out back during my 10-minute break, sit behind the dumpster, and breathe. Sometimes I'd pull out my old notebook beat up. Leather cover, pages crammed with handwritten business plans, branding sketches, market gap ideas. Ideas for a community-based retail co-op I dreamed of launching one day. A store run F people be people, but in Maplewood, I was just that girl behind the register, the one who barely talked. Then came the morning. Had started like any other coffee. Burnt, Craig grumbling about late deliveries, sleet ticking against the windows like a warning. I was on lane 2, helping an elderly woman buy cat food when the scanner glitched. It beeped, then nothing. I tapped restart. Nothing again. That's when Craig appeared. He didn't yell. That would have been too merciful. He leaned in close enough that I could smell his aftershave and stale coffee, and said in a voice laced with venom, "Do you need me to color code the instructions for you, Alicia?" Or I've woman in line gasped. I froze. All I could think to say was, "Yeah," he interrupted, louder now, addressing the whole store. "I guess the system's got too many errors these days. But I suppose I can't say that out loud, can I?" Then he smiled. Like a man who knew no one would stop. High-end people looked away. Some pretended to fix their carts. A teenager at aisle 4 had their earbuds in and didn't care. Another cashier glanced at me, then quickly turned. I felt the heat rising in my chest. But I smiled, nodded, pretended nothing happened. Again, because I'd learned the unspoken rules in towns like this. People like Craig get to make the rules. People like me are just lucky to be. But what no one knew, not Craig, not the customers, not even the girl on aisle 4, was that someone had seen it. Someone who looked like they didn't belong. He stood near the bakery aisle, wearing an old coat and a Red Sox cap pulled low, holding a half-empty coffee cup. Just watching, not blinking. I caught his eye for a split second before he turned and walked out, and on the counter where he'd been standing was a business. I didn't touch it right away. Not until after my shift ended. Not until after I cleaned the register, restocked the gum display, and nodded goodnight to a bee when I flipped it over. My hands went at read, Ethan Callahan, Strategic Advisor. Callahan Retail Hold. Sometimes it's the quiet ones who carry the loudest truth. Let's end right then, for the first time in a long time. I felt something stir and hope. I didn't call the number on that business card right away. I not because I didn't believe it was real, but because some part of me didn't believe I was. You see, when you've been told in 100 different ways that you're nothing more than a placeholder, that you're lucky just to be on the payroll, it messes with your sense of reality. You start second-guessing your own potential. You stop dreaming out loud. You turn the volume down on so I tucked Ethan Callahan's card into the back pocket of my wallet, right next to my emergency $20 bill and the photo of me and my mom outside her old food truck. The last day she smiled before Harry, told myself I'd call him after the next shift. Then the next, then the weekend. But I didn't, because there was still work to do, rent to pay, groceries to buy, and wounds that hadn't quite scabbed over yet. The week after the incident felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. Craig didn't bring up what happened, not directly, but he found other ways to twist the can. You're clocking in late, Turner. TW, that receipt printer better not be out of paper again. Wouldn't want another ... quotes, you know, even when a re-swallowed it, but that there was this Lee blinked. You think she nodded, serious? Yup, my comic has a hero named Alicia who saves animals and never lets bully laughed. It wasn't much, but it was honest. Sounds she's the strongest one, he said. Because she never yells. That hit me harder than B. After closing that night, I stayed late. Stocked shelves that weren't mine, swept the break room, cleaned the smudges off the freezer doors. No one asked me to. No one thanked me either, but that why I wasn't doing it for credit. I was doing it because I knew, in some weird cosmic way, this place needed someone to care about it, even if that same night, I finally opened my notebook again. The one with the leather cover and the two-stained corner. I flipped past the pages about inventory algorithms and cooperative pricing models and landed on a section I'd avoided for months. My mom used to say, people don't just need groceries, they need to feel like they matter. That's why she ran her food truck on donation days once a month, even when money was tight. That's why she made soup for the homeless during snowstorms, while fighting stag-eye looked around Mason's General Goods with its flickering lights and dusty shelves. Then I looked back at my own sketches of the neighborhood-owned retail hub, one that hires locals, pays live-in for the first time in forever. It didn't fit, felt. POA co-worker Maria, a stockroom clerk who barely spoke. During breaks caught up with me outside by the bike rack. She lit a cigarette with shaky hands and said, I saw what he did. That day, you didn't. D stared at her. Why didn't you say anything? Maria shrugged, eyes low. 'Cause I need this job. I got 2 kids, her voice cracked. But I'm sorry I didn't stand up. I just wanted you to know ... I see you. She handed me a torn piece of paper. It was a tiny flower, hand-drawn. That's from my daughter, she said. She draws them for people she thinks are. I still keep that drawing taped inside my locker door. That week wasn't easy. But it reminded me that I wasn't invisible. Not entirely. That even in the silence, there were people quietly rooting for me. And that maybe it was time to start rooting for myself again. That night I went home, sat on my bed, and stared at my phone for a full 10 minutes. Then I picked it up, found the card, and dialed the number. It rang twice. Then a deep, calm voice picked up. Ethan Callahan. I swallowed hard. Hi, this is Alicia Turner. From Mason's. You ... left a card? There was a pause. Then, I was wondering when you'd call. I didn't sleep much the night after I made that. Ethan said he'd be in touch soon, but didn't say when or how. No promises, no timeline, just that steady, unreadable calm in his voice. I should have expected that. People like but by the end of the week, the hope started fading. Life snapped back like an old rubber band. The store, the routine. Craig seemed extra smug lately. Like he could smell that I'd finally lifted my chin and wanted to poonies. "You've been walking around like you own the place," he said one morning while passing me in the stockroom. Let me remind you, UD gave him a nod. Not yes. It was the Saturday before Christmas. The store was packed. Locals coming in for last-minute baking supplies, kids running down aisles with candy canes and melted snow on their boots. My line was long and loud and full of winter koi, was doing my best to stay ahead, smiling, scanning, bagging like my life depended that one. It's supposed to be free. She snapped. I'm not paying for something that says free right on the damn sign, I tried to explain politely. Yes, ma'am, you're absolutely right. It's just the system didn't register the third item. She cut me off. Well, maybe if you paid more attention and less time braiding your hair in the mirror. That was all. Craigie was already at the end of the aisle. Arms crossed, face burr. Of course, he said loudly enough for half the store to hear. Of course. It high froze. The customer blinked. A man two-car. Craig walked toward me like a principal about to unleash hell on a student in front of the WA. You know, Alicia, he said, voice calm but cruel. This is why we don't promote from charity. Hires. I don't play dumb, he smirked. Let's not act like we don't both know why you're here. You checked the right boxes, congratulations, but that doesn't mean you're built for real response. It was so quiet. I could hear the heating unit kick in above the candy aisle. I looked around. Customers staring. One lady pretending to check the tabloids, another just shook her. Hey, Craig, I said quietly. I think you should scent. That was it. No yelling, no esky, just those but thaw. Oh, you thinks then? Dewey stepped so close I could feel his breath. You wanna prove something, Turner? Prove you deserve to be here. Fix the damn register. Something in me broke. I didn't cry, I just right into his and said no, because in that but what he didn't. Just behind me, at lane 4, a customer fumbled their phone and dropped it. When they picked it up, they didn't put it away. At least 2 more had already started filling right behind the cereal stand near the front of the store. Someone was watching everything. Someone in a dark gray winter coat with a familiar red socksatha shown up. Before Craig could say another word, Ethan stepped forward and spoke calm, measured, the kind of tone that slices deeper. Sir. Ethan stepped fully into the light now. Every camera phone in the room angled toward him. He removed his hat, then his gloves, then reached into his coat and pulled out a badge, the kind used at corporate levels for internal audits, the kind that only senior executives carry. Ethan Callahan, he said. I'm the new executive advisor for Callahan Retail Holdings, the company that now owns this store. Craig's face drained of color. Ethan continued, not even flinching. I've been observing this location for the past 3 weeks. We've had anonymous complaints. I've reviewed security footage, listened to staff interviews, but I wanted to see it with my own eyes. He turned to me, and now I have. There was a pause. A thick, quiet one. Then Ethan looked at the crowd. You've all just witnessed a clear violation of our company's code of conduct, racial harassment, and gross abuse of power. And I assure you this will not be ignored, Craig stammered. I didn't know you were. She's just always making mistakes. Ethan raised a hand. You've said enough. Then, softly but firmly, Mr. Harrison, as of this moment, you are relieved of your duties. Please exit the store. Our legal and HR teams will be in contact. Craig looked like he'd been punched in the chest. You can't fire me like this. He spat. Ethan stared at him cold. I just did. The entire store went silent. Then ... A single clap. Then another ... and another, until the place echoed with applause. Not for me. Not even for Ethan, but for justice. For something so rarely seen in places like this. Craig stormed out, muttering curses under his breath, shoving the exit door open so hard the bell snapped sideways, and I stood there, still behind the register, hands shaking. heart thundering but still standing. And in that moment, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt seen. The applause didn't last long. It never does in real life. After Craig slammed the door behind him, the noise faded fast. Some people quietly returned to their carts. Others murmured, unsure whether to congratulate me or avoid eye contact entirely. I stood there for a moment. Still, part of me expected someone to yell, "Cut!" Like this was some twisted reality show, and any minute now, the whole thing would rewind, and I'd be back under Craig's thumb, counting loose change and apologizing for Kubi. He was just Ethan nodded toward me before stepping away to make a pay. Few calls, calm, methodical. The way some people fold a shirt, deliberate and exact. As if he'd done this before that day. By evening, HR from corporate was already calling. I gave a statement over the phone. So did 3 other employees. I saw one of them crying in the back room afterward, part relief, part regret, I think. Craig had made people scared for so long that even his absence lay. When I got high show, but mostly, I just felt ... because when you've been fighting for so long, even winning feels like a bruise you didn't know you had. The next few days brought changes fast and sharp, like pulling off a band. Corporate sent out a regional rep. They handed out surveys, shook hands, asked a lot of, "How are you doing now?" Questions that felt more performative than personal. A few employees were eager to talk, others stayed quiet. Maria, the stockroom clerk with the cigarette and the drawing from her daughter, gave the most honest. She said, "I'm not okay, but at least I don't feel Sita for the first time in a long time." I started noticing little things. The as it wasn't a we. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice even. "Not just for what Craig did, but for what we didn't see sooner." I looked at him. "You couldn't have known." He shook his head. "No, Alicia, that's not good enough anymore. The truth is, too many people did know. They just didn't think it mattered enough to act." That sat heavy in the air. He sipped his coffee. "But I also didn't call you just to apologize." I waited. Ethan reached into his coat again and pulled out a thin folder. Inside was a brochure titled Community Retail Innovation Cohort, some kind of leadership accelerator sponsored by his company. "I've read your notes," he said, eyes sharp. "The ones in your notebook, the neighborhood co-op idea, the mentorship programs, the walkable food justice model. That's not just theory, that's vision." I blinked. "You read my notebook?" He grinned. "Maria might have accidentally sent me a few pictures." I smiled, unsure whether to be flattered or mildly freaked out. He leaned forward. "What I'm saying is, we want to sponsor you. Full mentorship. Funding, resources, space even, if you're ready." The words didn't land all at once. They just hovered there, like snowflakes waiting to melt. I looked down at my hands. I've been working the register for so long, I forgot what it felt like to start something. Ethan nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you remembered." That night I opened the notebook again. This time I didn't flip past the painful pages. I read them, all of them. The scribbles I'd made during late nights after double shifts. The models I drafted at the back of church bulletins. The sketches Mom had once commented on with a tired smile and a whisper. "You're gonna build something beautiful one day, baby," I cried, not out of sadness, but because something inside me finally cracked open, not from being broken, but from being ready. In the following week, I handed in my resignation at Mason's. It wasn't dramatic. No speech, no last jab. Just a printed letter and a quiet thank you to the new interim manager who smiled like he meant it. On my last shift, Maria hugged me tight and tucked another little paper flower into my pocket. "This one's purple," she said. "Means hope." I left the store with a single box of my things, my notebook tucked safely on top. As I walked out, someone shouted from across the street. It was the little boy with the crayon comic. "Hey, Super Alicia," he called, waving. "Did you beat the bad guy?" I smiled. Not just yet, I said. But I'm working on it. It's funny how quiet the world gets when you're no longer carrying the weight of Bayin. The first few weeks after I left Mason's, everything felt surreal. I didn't have to wear a name tag. I wasn't confined to 4 square feet behind a register. I didn't flinch every time someone raised their voice. Instead, I found myself in rooms I never workshops. Roundtables. Zoom calls with people who used words like equity framework and social capital like they were grocery items. Ethan connected me with mentors, strategists, even lawyers who specialized in community-driven businesses. Every day was like a masterclass in everything I'd ever dreamed of, only now. People were listened. And the not all about a week after my resignation. Someone tagged me in a Facebook post from a Maplewood neighbor. So the girl from Mason's who never even looked up from her register is now a big shot activist? Give me a break. She got her 15 minutes. Let there were, you can't just cry. Racism every time a manager does their job. Was I doing too much? Was I being too loud? Had I misread Craig's actions? Maybe he really be that voice in my head when I thought I'd buried came slithering back. Be grateful. Don't make noise. Keep your head down. But then I remembered the look in Maria's eyes when she whispered, I see you. I remembered that justice is never handed out in silence. So I closed and I got to work. The first space we found wasn't glamorous. An old laundromat. Off a side street that hadn't seen life since the 90s. The roof leaked. The back room smelled like old bleach. But the bones were good. It had windows that faced the morning sun and just enough floor space to house my first dream. A commune. I sketched the new logo myself. It was a Han because even the process wasn't easy. Licenses, permits, funding, fire inspections. So many nights I sat on the floor again. Papers everywhere, phone dying, coffee cold. But this time, it wasn't when reporter from a local podcast had heard about what happened. At Mason's, they asked if I'd speak on the record. Not just about Craig, but about what it means to be the first black woman in your town to own a storefront. The first cashier toy almost said no, but then I remembered something Ethan told me in passing. Sometimes, speaking up isn't about you anymore. It's about the person who's still stuck behind the counter. Thinking no one will so, I said and some people I'd never met started showing up to volunteer. A retired accountant from the next town offered to help with our bookkeeping. A group of teenagers asked if they could paint a mural on and then, one day, as I was unlocking the door for a delivery, a familiar face James. The janitor who used to sweep the floors at Mason's. He never said much. Always kept his head down, eyes low. I watched what you did. I saw how you held your ground, and I just wanted you to know. It mattered. But I remember, for the first time in my life, thinking, maybe I was one afternoon. I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in a while. A out of curiosity, or maybe foolish, we sat across from each other at a booth in a diner just outside Maplewood. She was nervous. If you really got him fired? She asked. Voy nodded. No, he got him. She looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. I thought what he said but then she added, still, I don't know. Maybe you could have handled it differently. It's just, now everyone's watching their words all the time. That hit because here's the truth. When you start to change the air in a room, the people who thrived in the old atmosphere will always say you're Karen. I said gently, maybe the reason it feels harder to breathe is because you're not the one. I left and I didn't be. The end of that month, Harvest Light held its soft opening. It was cold, it was humble, and the heat only worked on one side of the building, but it was ours. I stood near the entrance with Maria beside me, her daughter, clutching a marker, ready to sign when I looked out at the line forming along the sidewalk. Parents, elders, teenagers, strangers I didn't feel not, but opening day felt like the end of a harvest light was far from perfect. The ceiling still creaked in the wind. The back room needed paint. Our cash register was secondhand and jammed if you touched it too, They came with reusable bags, with kids on their hips, with homemade cookies and hand-drawn cards that said things like, "We're proud of you, and thank you if we sold out." Of collard greens by noon. The bread shelf was empty by 3 p.m. I was Maria worked the checkout, her daughter coloring behind the counter. James handled stock, humming old blues tunes under his breath. We didn't have titles. Just purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just trying to survive inside a system. I was BS, but then the next morning, my inbox exp someone had shared the podcast interview I did a few weeks ago. Apparently, it caught the attention of a local journalist, then a regional outlet. Then, somehow, it made its way to a national social. Impan just like that. Harvest Light went from a faux pas but because when the world starts watching, it also starts rudat, so she's turning into one of those woke celebrities now. Wisehuld Alra, hope she even some all not to mabu me. One even as a funny how people love when you rise. As long as you don't rise too high, but Ethan called you I hesitated. I didn't, I chuckled. You did get to HTH, booty hate, but I Quebec, so I wanna oppie, that he just the one woman I looked her d. I was as she held my tea that was bato cry yes. That Craig she came I recognize when I some she he. I nodded then I she. Suh, I thought I used a no fanfare. No p, just me bent down. Come as you be, and if I could be, then ever it was I not to that P. Mason's General Goods, looked exactly the same from the outside weathered sign. Crooked shopping carts, the same flickering light above the. But one afternoon, I found myself parked out front. Anyway needed closer 3 months had passed since I left. Since Craig was escorted out. Since Harvest Light became more than a dream, but something in me still felt unfinished. Like there was a chapter, so I've bell over the door gave the same tired chime. There were fewer customers that I remembered, fewer staff too. The energy felt off like a room after a storm. A new manager was behind the counter, someone I didn't recognize. A younger guy, clean-shaven, eyes glued to a clipboard. He glanced up, nodded politely, then went back to his inventory. She Iwan kahesti ishir. Eyes wid. Oh. Wow, she said. Didn't expect to see you here. I smiled, just barely. She folded her arms, trying to keep the tone casual. Heard you're some kind of celebrity now, that store of yours. Pretty impressive. She shifted her weight. Look, I know we didn't talk much before. And I probably should have stood up for you. But you gotta understand, it's easy to say what show high nodded slowly. You're right. Fear makes people quiet. But silence isn't neutral, Karen. It's as, I didn't come here to fight, I added. I just needed to see this place, one last time. Before I let it gosh, yoi before dushi dekreg. I thub forgive. Forgive Miss Fishy I because on thet fissy but instead her voice was low. Almost trembling. I treated you terribly, she said. I don't know if it was frustration or pride or just plain ignorance. But I saw that video later. And I saw me. I didn't rue because some truths need to land hard before they can tease. I'm sorry. I know that may not mean much, but I am. It doesn't erase what happened, I said. But it nodded, eyes glossy. Then left that. Evening, I sat on the back steps of Harvest Light with Maria, watching her daughter paint the sidewall in pastel colors. Swirls of yellow and pink, like spring flowers bursting through Mari ui nadas. Yeah. Just needed to look it in the eye. Maria was quiet. I'm not anger Mariah. Sat and see watching, and in that I had become the very thing I once needed. A place to land. A voice the IA presence, not because I see etch, but because I chase truth. When the thaw since. I walked out of lane 2, and into something I didn't even have words for at the time. Only a knowing deep in my bones. Tea harvest. Light had grown. we'd opened a second location in North Haven. A third was under renovation in a Latino-heavy neighborhood that hadn't had a fresh grocery store in 15 years. Our outreach programs now included youth internships. LDV storefront no longer just smelled like cinnamon bread or oranges. It smelled like change, but more than anything, it felt like home. Not Thebold, one afternoon early spring, I was invited to speak at a statewide equity conference in Montpelier. It was mostly educators, nonprofit leaders, and a few politicians in suits that didn't deny about what it meant to stand behind a register with dreams bigger than the store. About swallowing disrespect with every shift and learning how to tea, I told Aabo, and when I finished, the room didn't erupt into applause. It went silent, heavy, reflective, like they weren't clapping because they were still feel a dot and honestly. To Lechi Loche, tit was nevrian who'd been told. Sta everyone who dared to say, Falhat saw, zitasahi, oh yeah, I lo what he shrugged. I be he handed, you should that know but be to. KN where they weren't just Kaz they wy with. Whoa, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not shout louder. Sometimes justice doesn't come wrapped in noise. It in yo you just have to believe that the space you take up in this world is sacred. That your. Stoso reven even if rise, and because hop p that. Life lesson from the echo that stays. Not everyone is born in the right place, at the right time, or treated fairly from the start. But that doesn't mean we're meant to live in silence or stay small. Alicia Turner's story reminds us that silence in the face of injustice is never neutral. It becomes a quiet form of permission. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to shout back, but to stand tall with quiet dignity when others try to take it from you. We've all had moments where we were underestimated, misjudged, or even hurt by people we once trusted. But, as the old saying goes, real gold doesn't fear fire. Those with true worth will shine in their own time, as long as they don't give up on themselves. Most importantly, this story teaches us that healing isn't just for us. It creates space for others to be seen, to feel safe, and to bloom. Justice doesn't always come from revenge, but from the simple, unwavering choice to live according to your values, no matter how loud the world gets around you. If you've experienced something similar, we'd love to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone. Hit the like button if this story touched your heart, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, thought-provoking stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Wishing you a peaceful day, one where you feel strong enough to face what's ahead, gentle enough to stay kind, and grounded enough to never forget your worth in the chaos.